Hello YouTube, it's Pacman here, and today I will tell you more about Firebase authentication, and this is our continuation of making Chop Up alive. Last time we did the login screen and the login validation, UI validation, and today we'll try to create our users and try to log in by email and also by Google. So let's just start. Of course, first of all, if you like my videos and streams, please give a like and subscribe to my channel click that subscribe button. So let's just start. So what is the agenda? What is our plan for today? Well, we'll enable email and Google provider in Firebase console. Then we will set up the package for Firebase authentication. Then we'll write some code for logging and registering users by email and also by Google login provider. So today it will be more coding than UI stuff, but I hope that you will find this interesting as well. So to continue, let's just start. Let's just open our random chat application that we already created. Let's go to the authentication. Let's go to the sign in methods. And as you can see, Firebase has a lot of options, a lot of providers to enable. Today we'll enable email and password and Google, but as you can see, you can set up more providers, for example, Facebook. Apart from email and Google and phone and anonymous, if you decide to log in to enable Facebook provider, then please remember that you'll need to set up all of your app stuff on Facebook site as well, on Facebook developer site. I tell you from my experience, because I've created one app when I enabled Facebook provider, and there's a lot of configuration on Facebook site as well. So please remember, it's not only Firebase that handles all the stuff. It handles all the stuff for Google, because Firebase is from Google, so everything is integrated. So let's just enable email and password first. So we want a standard email password authentication without any passwordless sign in. Let's just save it and we'll add new provider now, and we'll add Google provider. Enable that. We need to set up the project public facing name. Yeah, we can change that later because later we will be focused on confirming email, and then in that email we'll need to have nice name and not project number. Also, project support mail needs to be added here, so we'll just click save. We wait a little bit. Now Google and email password is enabled, and basically that's it, what you need to do in Firebase console. It's fairly easy and very fast, but of course the hardest part is to integrate the providers in Flutter. So to do that, firstly we need to add our Firebase auth package to our application. So let's just do that. Let's just copy the code for adding the package. Let's just open our code. I hope it's big enough. I think the quality is good enough that you can see everything. So let's just go to our root folder of our Flutter project, and let's just pass our code to add the Firebase auth package to our pubspec.yaml file. And if we will go to pubspec.yaml file, we can see that Firebase auth was actually added. And now what we'll need to do, basically we need to create a stream listener for our authentication changes. So instead of going strictly to login screen, we need to firstly decide if the user is already logged in or not. And if it's logged in, then we need to go to not login screen, but basically to the main screen of our application specified for logged users. And to do that, we'll just create a new screen screen that we'll name decider screen. So Dart. Of course, it will be stateless widget, as for every screen, almost every screen. So let's just put decider screen here. Let's just add our root name. And now, instead of returning container, we will return stream builder, which will listen to our authentication changes from Firebase. And as a stream, we will add Firebase auth from our Firebase auth package instance auth state changes that will listen for authentication changes. As we can see, it returns the stream of user type, so therefore in the stream builder we also add our nullable user returning type. And for builder, what we need to return context and snapshot. Arguments in our anonymous function. And now we need to check first of all if our connection state is trying to receive some data or is still waiting, and therefore we return our circular progress indicator. Adaptive means that it is adaptive for Android and for iOS. So if you are on Android, then the circular progress indicator will look like typical Android one, and if you are on iOS, then your circular progress indicator will look like typical circular progress indicator for iOS operating systems. So then we need to check if our snapshot has data. If our snapshot does not have data, so the opposite sign. If it does not have data, then basically it means that there is no user in our authentication listener. So therefore, in this circumstances, we need to return our login screen. And else return main screen for logged users. And we already created that. This will be our home screen, where in our home screen we basically retrieve the test user data from Cloud Firestore from Firebase. So yeah, that's the first thing we need to do to our Firebase auth. Now we will concentrate on making the most interesting part, so setting up auth APIs for email and Google. And first of all, what we'll do, well, we can of course make everything static, but in this case I will show you how to make it in more, let's say, clear way or object-oriented way. So let's just create a folder called interfaces. Let's just create a file called login interface. Of course, that's a typo because that needs to be Dart, not DRRT file. And as you already know, I told you before, Dart language does not have interfaces. It can just have abstract classes, but of course we can name it login interface, and then create methods that will be overridden or implemented in desired child classes that will implement this interface or basically extend. What we need to do? Well, first of all, we need to create a method that will create future boolean, and we need to have sign in method. And for sign in method, what we need to do, we need to have a user, or maybe not username but email, and we want to also have password. And I created this as optional arguments because we will have sign in for Google login as well, and for Google login we don't need any email and password to be provided in that method. So that's why it's optional, and it will be only used in our email login API. So of course this is interface, so we don't need body, we just need the definition of our methods. And we also will have sign up function for creating new users. We also need email and password only for our email login API. And the third thing that we need to do, we need to have our sign up or logout function. But here we will not just define it, but we'll also make a body of this method, because for now it will be only the same for both Google and email APIs, and they both will basically refer to Firebase auth.instance, and that has the sign out function. Sign out, and of course we'll return true if our sign out is successful. And if you catch an error, then basically we can log the error to our console. Of course, logging is log method is from direct to developer, and it only logs in messages when we are in a debug mode and not release mode. So now, of course, we need to return false, because it's not successful whenever we catch any exception. Okay, and that's our login interface. So for API, we'll just create we'll start with our email provider. So let's just put login email API.dart file, and it will be a simple class login email API that will implement our login interface. And now you will see something interesting, because whenever I will write implement, then implement means that all methods needs to be overridden from the interface or from the abstract class, even though in login interface we have implemented sign up, because whenever I remove the sign up, because we don't need to override that, then we'll have an error about missing one overridden implementation of sign up function. So to fix that, basically we can change implements to extends, and therefore we can choose what methods we want to implement. However, we are forced to implement the methods that are only defined in the abstract class that doesn't have any body, so those two ones. But we don't need to override the function that is already has a body. So yeah, now we can start doing the logging in. So let's start with signing in the user. So of course, first of all, let's just put our code in try catch. Of course, we need to log our error message whenever anything is wrong, and return false in such circumstances. Of course, if we return in the future, then the whole function needs to be an async block. Maybe we'll just copy this, because that will be necessary. Oh, of course, that needs to be sign up, not sign in, because we want to override the sign up method. And I thought we did a bit wrong, because the extends doesn't force us to implement functions that are only defined. Extends actually makes the possibility of us to implement functions that we want to implement override. So we choose to override only those two, basically. Okay. So if we just comment it out, then probably I'm wrong again. Extends and implements are really can be really hard to understand, and yeah, okay, let's forget what I have just said. What I have just said at the beginning was correct. So we are forced to implement the functions that are only defined in abstract class and doesn't have any body. So yeah, that's it. Sorry for the confusion. Again, it's live, so everything can happen. But anyway, just start doing the important stuff. So what we need to do, we need to try to log in by our Firebase auth. And Firebase auth has a nice sign in with email and password function. And here we can just put our email and password. Of course, those values are nullables, so we need to force to try to pick up the value from the nullable strings. Of course, if email and password is null, then our exception will be caught. However, we already have UI validation that will force the user to put an email or password in the UI. And yeah, basically that's it. So we return true here, and that's the whole method for signing in. So let's just copy the code with try catch block, and now instead of sign in with email and password, of course we need to put our async word in the function. We need to put here Firebase auth instance, and we have sign. We have create user with email and password method with from Firebase auth, and here will be the same. Of course, we need to force it to be not nullable, and basically we need to return true, so that successfully the user is signed up, so the user is created in the Firebase. And now we'll do similar with the Google login. So let's just create a new file. It will be login Google API.dart file. So let's just name the class the same, and we just write extends login interface, and we need to create two missing overrides, so sign in and sign up. Let's just try with sign in. We just put try catch block, and of course we need to log the error whenever something is wrong and return false. And now what we'll need to use, we need to use our Firebase auth instance, and here will be something interesting because we'll use sign in with credential argument, and for credential this is auth credential, and therefore well, basically we'll need our Google credentials that we need to pick up. So yeah, to do that, well, first of all return true. To do that, we will need our Google login API package, Google sign-in package, which is basically designed for Google signing in. So let's just install it. Let's just copy the installing code. Basically, let's just pass it here and add the Google sign-in package to our pubspec.yaml file. It's already added. So what we need to do, we need to create our Google provider to be Google Google sign-in object. Maybe we can make it private because we don't need to make it public. So to get this credential, first of all, what we need to do, we need to refer to our Google sign-in object, and we need to try to sign in. And as you can see, it returns our Google sign-in account. So let's just name it Google account. Google account. And what we need to do now, we need to get our Google authentication object. And first of all, to do that, we need to refer to our Google account and get the Google sign-in authentication. Of course, we need to take into account that our Google account is nullable and our Google sign-in authentication can be null as well. So now we can create our authentication object, and to do that, let's just create our credentials. Our credentials object, of course. And to do that, what we need to do is refer to our Google auth credential. Sorry, not Google auth credential. Let me just check. Let me just check from our app because. Okay. It's not Google auth credential, it's Google auth provider, and we can create our auth credential from credential constructor of Google auth provider. And here what we can specify is the ID token, and we can get that from Google auth our ID token. And we can also put our access token. We need to also put our access token. It will be also from our Google auth access token. Of course, if any of those is null, then the whole operation will fail. Our exception will be caught, and our whole signing in operation will be false. So let's just put credentials here, and now we don't see any exception. And there is one important thing that I want to mention here. Whenever we go to the documentation of this function, then there is very important thing. If the user doesn't have an account already, one will be created automatically, which means that whenever this Google account is not created in Firebase authentication, then this account will be created, which therefore means that our sign up function doesn't make any sense to implement, because it will be basically the same function as sign in. So therefore we can just put a comment that signing up is part of sign in function. And basically that's it. And basically, yeah, that's the whole API functionality that we needed to implement. So if we go back to our agenda, well, first of all, we created our code for logging in, but of course we need to test it. And to do that, what we need to do, we need to go to our login form. So we are in our login form. We have our submit function that we use for validating our form. So now we need to send data to our server. Let's just start with our email login. So what we need to do? Well, we can refer to our API, but we have not initialized our API, so we can do it here. So let's just put our final login email API sorry, not final, tribulate login email API. And of course that's a lazy loading, so what we need to do, we need to initialize our API in initial state. So before any UI is rendered, then we initialize our login email API, which will be a new instance of login email API class. And now we can refer to that. So let's just add a final is login success, and it will be our login email API. Of course, it's this one. And let's just try firstly to sign up the user. We need to have email and password, and to do that we need to get that email and password. And as we already did that, we have our controllers that handles the text typed in our inputs in email and password, so we can use that controllers to get our email and password created by user. So let's just put our email to be email controller text trim, and let's just do that the same with password, so it will be our password controller text trim. And what we need to do, we need to refer to those two values by adding it, but assigning it to our named optional arguments of our sign up function. Of course, there is also other thing, because we have our registering flag is registering flag, so we should only sign up only when our registering is set to true. So whenever is registering is set up to true, then we want to sign up. If not, we want to log in, which therefore means that we need to execute the sign in function. So now what we need to do, because as you can see our submit function is asynchronous, because we need to wait until our user is sign up or sign in, and therefore means that we need to show something to user that something is loading basically. So whenever this function is executing, whenever we wait for a server response, we need to show some kind of indicator, loading indicator to the user. And therefore we need to have another flag, which will be named bool is loading. Of course, at the beginning it's false. And instead of returning our card with a form of logging, what we can do, we can check if our form is loading, or basically our boolean is we are waiting for the server response. And if we are waiting, then what we can return our circular progress indicator. Of course, it's adaptive one. And now what we can do, we can set up our setting state. We cannot set state and set up our is loading boolean to be true at the beginning. Now the all logging process is taking place there, and what we can do, we can assign is loading to false. And now what we can do again, we can add another boolean, which will be is has failed, and that flag will determine whenever our isLogin success is false, and therefore if there's any error, then we'll show an error message. And to do that, we can add at the bottom a check if has failed. Then we can add a text. Oops, something went wrong. and that will be shown only if our flag is true. And we can set up our flag has failed, which will be the opposite of our is login success. So we can save it, and what we can do now, we can assign our Google login to our button login Google, and to do that, well, we need to have we can implement this function here on in the button login Google widget. However, we can also implement this function in our login form, and therefore we'll have access to our isLoading flag, and we can change it because we cannot change it in our button login Google because it's stateless widget, so we cannot change any state there. So yeah, what we can do, we can Google login, we can assign a new argument for the constructor, which will be an empty function, or function that will return nothing and doesn't accept any arguments, and we will name Google login, and we need to add it as required named argument to our constructor of button login Google widget. Of course, now our code complains that we need to specify that Google login. So yeah, we can specify it as a new function, and let's just create this function, create method from suggestion. Of course, it will be also asynchronous. And here, well, first of all, we need to set up our isLoading to true, and our isLogin success variable will be function from our login Google API. However, we have not specified our Google login API. So what we can do, we can specify it below our login email API. Just name it login Google API, and let's just initialize it in our init state function with the Google login API. And now I'll just refer to our Google login Google API sign in. We don't need to specify our email and password because Google will just pick up the Google account that you will see in a second how it works. And yeah, what we can do, we can set state, and we can copy what was done in our previous login email API. And yeah, basically it's the same code. So now what we can do, we can also add, whenever this login success will be true on our Google or email API, then according to our decider screen, we will be navigated to our home screen. So our home screen now, it only reads our test data. So instead of reading our test data, well, basically apart from reading our test data, what we'll do, we'll just wrap it into a column, and let's just have it in the center. Cross-axis alignment will be also center, but to have that working, we need to specify our width, and it will be double infinity, so take as much space as possible on device, and therefore our horizontal alignment will be in center. So apart from our future builder, what we will have our logout button. So let's just it doesn't matter if it's login email API or Google API, because sign out function will be the same. And as a child, let's just put simple text, and for our string text it will be sign out. Okay, and now one thing that I forgot to do basically is that we need to go to our decider screen, and it will be good also to register our roots that I forgot to do. So we'll just register our decider screen root name. It will be context, and it will be new instance of decider screen, constant instance of decider screen, and we can do the same with our home screen, and we can do the same with our login screen. Okay, finally now I think we can test it. Oh man, I forgot to open the emulator before start of the stream again. So yeah, maybe I'll just put chapters if it will take a long time. So maybe we can make some layout magic on our screen to have everything in one place. Okay, now that looks better. We can make it more narrow. So in the meantime, you can add a comment, and yeah, whenever you think something can be done better, then you are welcome to put a comment, and yeah, that will be appreciated. Okay, our device has started, so now we can run our application. And to do that, let's just run it, run without debugging. Of course, it's taking more time. Taking more time as always, but do not worry, it will start. As you can see, it has started. So maybe we can start with Google, because now when I click login by Google, well, as you can see, we are logged in, because I was logged in by one Google user on this device, on the one Google account. That's why it picked up this account. But if I will go to our users, you can see that this account was added, and this is the ID of the user. And to confirm that it's working, then in our maybe in our login email API, maybe we can log our user user credentials UID. So just add the log method, and it will be user credentials user UID. And let's do the same. Let's do the same with our signing in method, and let's do the same for our login Google API. So we need to add this here and add this here. Okay, so now if we run the function, now we are in the home screen. However, it's error here because we don't have sufficient permission on our Google Cloud Firestore security roles. To fix that, well, we need to go to our Firestore database. We go to our roles, and as you can see, all requests before the 9th of or 10th of 9th of October, sorry, will be rejected. But let's just change it, and let's just change it to be request.auth is not equal to null. Let's just save it and publish. And now we can read and write to our database whenever our authentication object of request is not equal to null, so whenever we are authenticated. So let's just restart the app. Yeah, and as you can see, the data has been read now. So if we sign out, we can see that we are back in our login screen, and this is mainly because in our decider screen, our stream listener has read a change in our auth state changes, and now we are not authenticated anymore, which means we don't have any data, and now we are returning our login screen instead of our home screen. So let's just log in again and look at our console. You can see this is the ID of the user because I added the logging function for logging the user's UID, and we can see that it's the same as in our Firebase authentication. So now we'll just test the email login and maybe error handling. So maybe let's just add an address and a password, test 1, because it needs to be 5 characters. Try to log in, and we have an error in our console. There is no user record corresponding to this identifier. The user may have been deleted, which means basically that there is no such user with this credential, and that's true because we haven't created it. And we have our error message, oops, something went wrong at the bottom. So what we can now do, we can add the user, so it will be test1 password. We'll try to register, and we have Firebase auth weak passport exception. The password should be at least 6 characters, because in our UI we have only checked for 5 characters, but the Firebase itself has its own rules, and it says that it needs to be 6 characters. So let's just add the 6th character and try to register. And yeah, we are signed in, and to confirm this, we can refresh our users table, Firebase console, and we can see that we have created our test user here. However, there is one thing, that this email is not confirmed when we use the email provider, so we need to manually confirm it and send a verification link on our email, which will be done in further streams. But for Google provider, anyone who signs in with Google provider has automatically its email verified. So now what we can do, yeah, we can sign out, and the whole authentication error handling from errors sent by Firebase will be handled separately in a further stream. But yeah, for now, I think it's all that I wanted to show you. So now you know how to authenticate the user in the Firebase by email and Google, which are really popular providers. And you also know how to sign out the user, and then automatically user will see the login screen again. So yeah, I think for today it's all, and in the next video probably I will show you how to handle errors from Firebase authentication. So, for example, this error for 6 characters that we can see in the console. And yeah, we will basically show the errors to user that are specific to specific Firebase authentication exceptions. So yeah, that's it for now. So see you next time. Who is the best?